Welcome back to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. We're so glad that you joined us once again today as we talk about all kinds of different topics like life, faith, and ministry.
Yeah, welcome everyone. And we're a little delayed this week because you've been a bit unwell.
I have not been myself for quite a few days.
It's the tail end of winter, and as always in Brisbane, everyone's got the flu. So,
and I've been working really hard, so I haven't been able to stop and get well.
But you're sounding a little better today, so that's good.
Yes, I still have my deep voice, though.
Yeah, I like the deep voice. So today we're talking about haunted houses.
Do you believe in ghosts?
So I have here a definition of what a haunted house is. The reason that I just find it interesting because apparently almost or around 40% of people believe in haunted houses.
Yep.
A haunted house, spook house or ghost house in ghost lore is a house or other building often perceived as being inhabited by disembodied spirits of the deceased who may have been former residents or were otherwise connected with the property, often to do with violent past tragic events, so on.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. That's the description of a haunted house. And I wanted to ask you, have you ever seen a haunted house or been in a haunted house?
It's funny that you ask. Actually, my oldest brother, when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, purchased an old property in Georgia, in Covington, in that area. And it was a property, like he had barns and a really big sort of old farmhouse, and we came to find out there were Indian burial mounds on the property somewhere. But just this kind of lovely little country home is about 150 years old at that point in the 80s, you know. Yeah, beautiful little place and property.
He lived there with his wife, didn't he?
He did, and why he chose to buy this, I don't know. You know,
he's not really a farmer or anything.
No. I guess he had horses at the time, and I guess he wanted somewhere for his horses.
Okay. There you go.
That.
Yeah.
But anyway, you know, for an 8 or 9 year old, it was really exciting. It was like, oh, I could go and ride a horse, and you know, he had a tractor and different things, so it was pretty fun. But the place turned out to kind of have a history about it. And locals tell stories all about this place. So even though we have personal experiences of, for me, visiting there, I never stayed there overnight, but visited there, and he lived there, I think, something like 8 years. Lived there a long time.
Wow.
For it to be a haunted house. But really, look, I don't believe in ghosts. As you described it before, you gave a definition saying it's like disembodied spirits. And that's where I go, I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Or at least in ghost in the traditional idea that this is somebody who's died and they're not at rest. And so they're roaming the earth, haunting places or whatever. I think the Bible's pretty clear with that. When we pass away, our spirit lives on, yes, but it goes to one of two places. You either go to a place of judgment or you go to a place of peace with God. And so you're not just sort of left roaming around the earth. Now, people will go, well, how come ghosts look like people that we know, you know? Because like one of the hauntings at my brother's place was the guy, I don't remember his name. This is many years ago, and I was very young. I have heard the stories since, but I don't remember all the details. But whatever, the guy who lived there for many years, maybe built the place, his name was like Farmer Smith. Let's just say it was like Farmer Smith, Old Man Smith, something like that. And he always wore this particular set of overalls and a shirt. And people would often see him, you know, 100 years after he died, sitting on the front porch in his overalls and shirt. There's old Farmer Smith, you know.
Yeah.
So sometimes the demonic, I believe it's all demonic. And the demonic was around. We know they're spirits. They're not temporary in their time frame. They're eternal. And so 150 years ago, they were there. And they knew Farmer Smith wore overalls and a specific shirt, right?
Yeah, and they can kind of bend light and make things appear as though they are and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and so they would mimic that stuff or whatever. So, you know, spoiler alert, I don't believe in ghosts, and I do think it's just demonic activity by and large. I do think particularly most haunted places, like I have shared before, I kind of have a guilty pleasure of listening to or watching ghost hunter shows and that kind of thing, just because I think it's entertaining and it's funny. But with that, it's often places that have trauma. You know, somebody's been murdered, someone's died in a sad or traumatic way. And I do think those really emotional events draw the demonic, and that they attach, I think, to that negative sort of energy.
And sometimes they were involved in the tragedy. I mean, generally, that's why they were there, is because they participated. They were part of it. They made it happen at times. You know, if someone throws themselves off a bridge, you know, there's going to be demonic activity involved in that, or someone, you know, murders a whole family in their beds. There's going to be some sort of demonic activity behind that. And so that event empowers them even more, and they hang around.
Yeah, and I think our sort of fear and interest in it and just telling the stories kind of keeps it going and going and going.
So what's interesting is that many years later, you and I actually bought a house just down the road from that haunted house, and we used to drive past it every day. And one day you told me the story of this haunted house because there was a four-way stop, I think, right near the house. And there were still stories circulating then, many years later, about a woman in a white dress that would show up at the four-way stop and frighten people.
Yeah, it's kind of it's almost a stereotypical ghost story. Supposedly on that road, on their honeymoon night, a couple had a wreck and the husband died and they never found the body. And she died as well, but she's out looking for the body. So That's the story, is this, you know, widow now who's just been married, but now a widow. She's out with her lantern looking for his body in the middle of the night because they never found it. Well, the lady in white, okay, we had a lot of experiences with her, and there are still car wrecks at that intersection regularly because in the middle of the night, people drive through there and a woman in a white dress suddenly appears in the road and they swerve and run off the road and different things like that. But there was constantly car accidents in front of that, in front of this house because of a woman in a white dress in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Now, for us, this house is like a very large house. It had many bedrooms.
Yeah, it was a beautiful house.
In fact, my brother and his wife at the time closed off half the house and only lived in half of the house because it was so big they didn't need to live in the whole space. So, and they still had and
they probably got it for a steal because it was haunted and no one wanted it.
Probably. I've never asked him if he knew it was haunted when he bought it, but
he certainly found out.
Yeah.
So tell us some stories.
Well, so because it had lots of space, he had a good friend and he lived there for a while. And one night he was coming home, and it was a bit of a property you could drive around and all at that time. And the lady in the white jumped in the back of his pickup truck, floated into the back of his pickup.
Oh my gosh.
And of course this freaked him out. And so he's like sliding across the road and everywhere back and forth and just trying to get away as fast as he could. She would often come and look in the windows at night. So you would have a woman in white looking in the windows of the house. So multiple people saw or experienced something like that. Mm-hmm. She probably was the most active sort of sighting around the house.
And I remember there were footsteps or something at another time, weren't there? There was a little kid.
Well, as I said, they closed off half the house and they lived in one half, and then the other half was just kind of open. Now, this house, again, I actually got to go back into it as an adult. My nephew, he was just a really small kid at that time and grew up there for a few years. He and I one night just went, let's go knock on the door. Let's just see if they'll let us in, because we hadn't seen it in 20 years at this point or whatever. And we went and knocked on the door and got inside. And the person who lived there let us come inside. Like, we explained who we were. Oh, we used to, my brother used to live here and my nephew grew up here and all this. Can we see what it looks like? They let us in. Very nice. But anyway, I just remember as a kid, if you went in the front door, it had these very, very high ceilings. Like, it felt like 50-foot tall ceilings. It wasn't like when I went back as an adult, the ceilings weren't as high as I imagined them and all. But there were sets of rooms. There was basically a big corridor that you would walk into and big rooms on either side, and then there was stairs up to an upper bedroom area where there was a couple of bedrooms upstairs. And that was just half the house, and then you could keep going, and there was more rooms and kitchens and all kinds of stuff, right? Well, that front section is what was cut off. And I remember we used to go over occasionally and have dinner at night. In one of those side rooms off the main corridor coming in the front door was an old organ. And it's like a 200-year-old organ. It wasn't plugged in. It did work, but it didn't, they weren't using it. It wasn't something that normally would be going. And as I say, that half of the house is closed off. When we would go over there, on more than one occasion, I could hear the organ playing.
Wow.
Now, I'm a musician, and I was a musician, and even as a child, I did a lot of music. And I just would be sitting there going, "Oh, do you hear the organ?" And my parents and all be like, "I don't hear an organ." I'm like, "No, listen, there's an organ." And then we'd go over there, and we'd open up everything, turn on the lights, nothing's happening, So,
wow.
But I heard that organ multiple times. I still remember that very clearly. I don't know. Was the organ playing? Was it in my head? I don't know. Just lots of strange stuff would happen. The upstairs area, apparently a little boy died up there. Now, that's one of the things with this house is because it was so old, multiple people had died in the house. It just
has a history.
Yeah, because it was just so old. And so a little boy apparently had died upstairs of some sickness at some point. You could often hear footsteps upstairs. It sounds like a little kid going and jumping off of a bed. Basically, you hear do-do-do-do-do, boom, do-do-do-do-do-do, boom. Just like a kid just running circles, jumping off a bed.
Yeah, that's a bit disconcerting.
And so then you'd go up the stairs and turn on the lights. Nothing's there.
Yeah.
Just crazy stuff like that. Probably the funnest one in that big main corridor with the high ceilings. Whatever was in there liked to pick people up sometimes. So people would just feel like someone had the bottom of their feet and pick them up, and they would be 6 feet off the ground in the air with nothing under them. So my sister-in-law experienced that at least once or twice, and other people had themselves being picked up into the air.
Yeah, I remember you saying you saw that, though.
Yeah, I think I saw that once.
Because you told me that you turned around and she was just levitating in the air.
Yeah.
And she said to you, "Don't worry, it'll put me down soon."
Yeah. So they kind of knew what was happening. What else? I remember as a kid, I took my bicycle there. Like we were there for a Saturday or something. And I took my bike because it was a big property to just ride around. And I just remember riding by myself, and I heard my name called over my shoulder, and I turned around and looked, and it was just a dark figure. Just kind of imagine a dark cloaked figure in the distance. And anyway, that scared me to death.
Yeah, I bet.
And so I'm like racing my bike as fast as I could back to the house, and inside. I wouldn't ride by myself after that anymore.
Well, so now that you know what you know about the demonic and spirits, and you have actually done a lot of house cleansings since then of people who have experienced these kind of supernatural phenomenon in their houses, they'll call you up and say, "Can you please come and cleanse my house of the demonic spirits?" So what would you do now if you were in that situation? If you went into a house like that, you were invited in, it was your brother owned it, and you know everything that you know now, what would you do?
Yeah, well, one, in that sort of situation, I tend to want to find out if there's any known history about the house. I want to know some history. Has anybody died? Who owned it before you? What was happening with them? And when I go into someone's house, those are the questions I ask. And often you'll go, "Oh, well, we bought this house because the couple before us went through this nasty divorce, and their son committed suicide, and blah, blah, blah." So you'll have these backstories. I often like to know that stuff. Now, you don't always know everything that was going on. Sometimes you sell a house or you buy a house from someone. You only interact with them at the table when you're signing, going, if
at all, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you don't even see them. So you don't know the backstories. But if there is a backstory, I like to know that, because it does make an impact about it. It helps me to tune into what probably is going to be operating there. the type of spirit. So as I say, I don't believe in ghosts in that traditional way that they're disembodied spirits. I believe they are the demonic. Part of the reason you might ask, well, why would the demonic haunt a house? Like, why are they zeroed in to a specific place, like a location? And the thing is, the demonic, unlike the angelic, doesn't get the opportunity to return to God's presence and be refilled and be glorified. You know what I mean? So like they talk about the angels, they go into God's presence and they shine because they've been in God's presence. Like, so they radiate, but that's not permanent. Okay. Because it's not their glory.
Not their glory.
Yeah. It's not their glory, but they're able to absorb that glory, and it re-energizes them to go and do stuff. The demonic doesn't get to do that. So what do they have to do? They have to feed off of something. And so they have found that they can be empowered through sin and evil and fear and
anger, hatred.
Yeah, all these negative sort of things. So if there's a place that's dark, and darkness too. So if there's a dark place and there's these emotions that are really pent up in that place, it's a happy home, like it's a place where they don't have to roam around trying to find nourishment. It's there in that place. And I think some of the haunting kind of stuff that they do, which again, if you watch like ghost hunter programs and they think these things are so scary, the door closed by itself.
Yeah.
Ooh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is, I'm sure, if you were standing in that dark room by yourself, it is a little freaky and it does scare you. But I just find it hilarious that that's what they're doing is, I'm going to close the door.
And obviously it does get worse than that, and it does get more scary. But so sometimes there might be spirits hanging around in a place because of the things that have happened there and who's lived there in the past and that sort of thing. But sometimes you might be living in a place and it suddenly becomes haunted. And in that situation, that would be maybe that you've opened a door.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the things that if you dabble in the New Age or witchcraft, the occult, if you start dabbling in that stuff, it's very quick to make an opening in your home.
If you decide to suddenly hate someone, something happens and a really intense hatred kind of takes over your life, or fear or any of those sorts of things, if it becomes an extreme thing and you're relying on the demonic to help you or support you, or you've given some sort of opening to them. Yeah. That can happen as well.
Yeah, even habitual sin, that kind of stuff. So for me, to get back to your question, because I know we've gone off on a rabbit trail, one, I want to know a back history if you know anything. Two, I want to know, where do you particularly feel uneasy in your house? Like, are there particular areas that you go, I just don't like going in that back, laundry room or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'll concentrate more on those places. For me, the process, it's kind of like, this is not going to sound very exciting. You kind of would have to be there, I guess, to find any excitement in it. Mm-hmm. But I literally just sort of feel my way through a house. So I just ask God to show me through my senses, where he wants me to pray, where he wants me to operate. And it gets very specific to the point of a door threshold. So you might be in a hallway, you feel fine. And as soon as I cross that threshold to go into a bedroom, I don't feel it. Like, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
Like you can go, this feels different to this. This is not nice. This is okay. And so I just operate through that. And then I have to ask Holy Spirit, why does this room feel bad? Like, what is it that I need to pray against or pray for? And it's just a slow process. Sometimes it's just going room to room. And
you can question the people that live there, to find out if they have opened a door in some way, if they've brought this in. Like, for example, if you went across the threshold into a specific room, well, who lives in this room, or who's here the most? And, what's going on in their life.
And oftentimes God will bring my attention to items in that room, even spots. Like, sometimes it'll be like, there's just something in the top left part of the closet, and you open it up and you start to look and you find stuff. Pretty regularly, you find stuff that you go, oh, that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's items and
we often, people ignore those little niggling feelings that we have. So we might think, oh, I don't like the look of that statue. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. But we ignore it because we think, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's just a little statue or bit of jewelry or whatever it is, where we should be really paying a bit more attention to the way that we feel about those kinds of objects.
Yeah, and the reason for that is the demonic can attach to non-person items. So just a regular salt shaker or a piece of wood or a pitcher or a death mask or all those kinds of things that often people buy, little trinkets and things when they go to a foreign country. You don't know what's been done over that. Like, yes, it might look culturally cool, but there may have been some sort of ceremony or ritual done over that thing, and there's a demonic presence or darkness attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, one example might be a dream catcher. A lot of people get them to have better dreams and to not have nightmares, but then they actually cause more nightmares.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a pagan practice, so it's one of those things we have to be smart about that. So, yeah, if I ran into a house like my brother's at this point, that would be a long day. Like, that would not be a place that I would probably be able to walk into and then an hour later be done. I think there's a lot going on there, particularly with the Indian burial ground on the property. That brings a whole nother set of spiritual things to the property. So, which is funny because you think that would probably be one of the sources of it, but there was not anything that we necessarily saw with that. At one point, my brother had a psychic or someone come out to try and deal with it.
That probably didn't help.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they meant well, but anyway, it was funny. In one of the barns, this lady was able to say, there is this chifforobe, and she was able to describe it in detail and said it's in one of the barns, and if you go find it and burn it, then the spirit will be appeased, kind of thing. And sure enough, they went back into this barn and found this old chifforobe that was just back in there, and they burned it. I remember because I remember coming and seeing where they had burned it, and the ashes were there. But this old antique chifforobe, and
wow,
yeah.
So what would you do then? You would pray?
So yeah, for me, like I say, I would just have to go and pray through room to room. Because there was stuff all along this whole property in barns and then just into the land. Like, it would be, as I think about it now, that would have been a really big chore, actually. I think that would probably take a couple of days because there's so many things I think you have to pray over and to negate and exchange with God's presence.
Yeah.
And it's going to vary time to time. It might be, like, for instance, I'm just using this language, the ghost of the little boy. You might have to pray through grief up there of the loss of a child. You might have to sort of cleanse the room from the grief and from the sickness and death that occurred there and restore God's joy and God's peace and God's vitality, So it would be exchanging that darkness for light, for good things.
Okay.
Yeah, that are in God. So that would be one of the ways that I would do that in a practical sense. I remember doing a house cleansing a few years back, actually in our neighborhood, and it was the funniest experience. This was another one that was very hard. A couple were moving; they were moving back, and this was her parents' home, and she grew up there. And they were moving back to Brisbane, and they didn't have a place just yet, and so they were considering staying with her mother in this childhood home, but she had a very traumatic childhood and relationships were not very good and lots of bad stuff happened in this home. So the husband asked for me to come and just pray over the house just to see what I thought, whether it would be wise for them to do this or not, and to kind of give it a bit of a blessing and a cleanse. It took me, I remember it was hours. Like, we spent hours. Like, I remember I spent an entire hour just in the stairwell kind of area. And it was very hard to shift what was there. Part of that was I didn't have direct permission from the owner. So the son-in-law had asked the mom, is it all right if I bring somebody to pray? And she was like, I guess. but she had not really addressed that with me directly. So normally I want whoever owns the house and has authority there to give me permission to pray.
Yeah.
Like that's a really important thing to me, is to have authority. So I kind of sort of had permission to do it. It wasn't like I was trespassing or anything. They knew I was there and all that, but it wasn't necessarily something that the real owner was keen for. But that's okay. It was very hard work. And finally, after several hours of praying, I went, it finally feels good in here. And so we started to say our goodbyes and this and that. We walk out. Every single spirit was just in the front yard. Like it just hit me like a wall of bricks. They literally were just waiting for me to leave.
Yeah, so they could head back in.
They were going to go straight back in. As soon as I left, they were going straight back in, and they literally were in the front yard.
Oh, dear.
So
that was a bit of a waste of time.
It was. It was so funny. And so I gotten them out. They had to move out of the house. They went out of the house, but they had not gone.
So you really have to have authority to be able to cast the demons out of your house or out of your home in the same way as out of a person.
Yeah, totally. And so when I go to someone's house, like I don't have to ask permission in my own home. I can start praying right now and I have the authority because this is my home.
Yeah.
But if I come to your house and, as a listener, that would be one of the first things I ask is, do I have your permission to do spiritual warfare and cleansing on your behalf over your home and property? And until you give me that permission, then I probably am not going to do it.
Yeah, and I know you do that at churches too. If we visit a church, you ask for permission to do the spiritual warfare prayers.
Yeah, because it's the same thing. Maybe that should be a podcast. It's in my book. I have a chapter in my book called Don't Poke the Bear. But maybe it should be something we talk about on here, because there is a spiritual hierarchy and there are spiritual sort of rules that you need to follow to do spiritual warfare. I think it's some people do it very unwisely and think that they can just go confront really powerful spiritual forces and there will be no consequence to that. Well, that's not my experience.
So if you could give people a checklist, if they're experiencing some of this phenomenon in their life, in their home, in their friend's house, that sort of thing, what's a checklist of, okay, here's how we address it?
Well, look, first, you need to be a Christian. So you need to know God. 2, you just basically, it's particularly for somebody who owns a space. And, okay, this can get tricky if you go, well, I rent, or I just rent a room and somebody else owns the house or whatever else. Okay, if you, for instance, if you only rent a room but somebody else owns the rest of the house, you have authority over your room because you're paying money to have that room. Now, you can't go around the entire house because you don't have authority there. You don't own it or have that.
Or either
authority.
Get authority, have that person give you authority.
Saying independently of that.
Yeah.
But like in your room, if you're a renter and you have a room, you have authority there. So the rest of the house could be dark and you can make your room light because you have authority there. Like if you're renting a house, again, you have authority there, even though you don't have a mortgage for it. You don't own it outright. Like for us, we have a mortgage on our house. The bank, I guess, technically owns it and we're paying them off on it, but we own it because it's
our house.
It's our house, yes. By spiritual authority, it's our house. So you have to know that. So you just take your authority in Jesus Christ. I mean, it might be as simple as just saying, in Jesus' name, I command every bit of darkness that's here to leave. You're not welcome anymore, and I command you to go. This is my house. And then invite Holy Spirit to come in and fill any place where darkness has been. Holy Spirit, would you come and fill it with the light of God? Just a really simple sort of thing. So it doesn't have to be this big dramatic and strong strategic model. It's just really taking authority. So if there are rooms, like I was saying, maybe the back laundry room always feels really weird, or everybody has those stories. I hated going to the barn when I was a kid, or, I've heard all these stories. Well, all right, go in, ask God, why do I feel uneasy in this place? What is it? Sometimes he'll tell you, sometimes he won't. And you just have to take authority then and just go, if there's any darkness operating in this place, I command you to leave now.
Yeah.
In the name of Jesus Christ. It's pretty simple. Like, it's not rocket science.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing that and the very interesting haunted house stories.
Yeah. We got to talk about ghosts.
And you got to use your button.
Yes, I got to use my button. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody. You've been listening to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thank you so much for all your support and your listens each week. We just hope that you find a blessing, an encouragement, or learn something new each week. Please tell a friend, like and subscribe, share it around. It really helps us here as we grow the podcast. We pray that you have a blessed day.